me kind of doing a very light take on the version of Batman I was raised by, which is sort of post Neil Adams take, which he was doing the year I was born. Neil Adams was redefining the character kind of in the cracks and corners of DC when he was first a cover artist on a lot of the Batman books in the late 60s. And then once they gave him sort of the run of the place, his look, he kind of exaggerated even more with the lighting and the grandeur, the way he would exaggerate the figure form, the length of the ears, the length of the cape. A lot of it was just sort of aesthetics. He wasn't really changing the costume per se. I tried to illustrate what Adams did with a sense of maybe somewhat photo exacting kind of take on it, while also kind of avoiding some of the comic book tropes of the glowing white eyes, which I was always having a problem with as a kid, thinking about like how the mask is pretty much on his face like it's makeup. Like it's as close to the skin as you can get the way it was drawn by everybody, Adams included. And if that's the case, there's no room to hide the eyelashes for the human being wearing this mask. So basically just his natural eyes showing, but you can hide that in shadow. This movie, The Batman, has improved on that, plus also cutting open the jawline area to be wider as opposed to thinner. The Nolan movies with Christian Bale's mask were getting more and more pinched around the cheeks, where the mask was almost like building up this false face and jawline. In action, in performance, it has a great way of feeling like you're watching the character be born in a way that's much more earthy than what we've had up to date. The idea that the riches of this man can buy this sort of perfect, physically death-defying outfit and physicality reached into the absurd over most all the movie takes. I had the gig on Batman's books doing the covers for just about a year, and it was one that started off with the best of intentions, where I was doing both monthly covers for Superman and Batman at the same time. It seemed like it should be a thing I could do for a long time, and then I found out pretty much right after I had signed on for the gig that Batman was going to be killed off within a year. In the case of the Batman job, I had laid out a bunch of cover possibilities of designs and things that even led towards suggestion of storylines. This one design didn't make the final cut of those covers, but the incorporation to the character with the logo was reliant upon it being that original Gaspar Saladino logo from the Neil Adams run from 1970, which would be the logo for the book for over 20 years, I believe, and was also the logo that we saw adapted into the first Keaton Batman movie from '89. So I was trying to bring that back because I thought it was a classic part of history that they had gotten away from. The approach on the piece itself is to basically say, here it is. This is the thing I wanted to do. This is the freaking cool ass logo that you guys should be using. At the time that I was working on the Kingdom Come JSA storyline, they were doing a lot of stuff that spun out of that, and I was off and on getting to illustrate the classic Black Adam character, who, if you take notice of any of the paintings I've done, it's clearly very different than looking like this sort of quasi-Egyptian looking version of the character. And his original design, even though aesthetically he's supposed to have been an Egyptian man, or he's an Egyptian slave who was then empowered with the power of Shazam to then become super Captain Marvel-y, he was drawn to have pointed eyebrows and pointed ears for some reason. Only ever done artwork of him looking like that version that was the original version of the character. in his reprisal over the years, a lot of artists have transformed that to be, make him look more ethnically appropriate for the region he's supposed to be from. And that's, of course, the intention of the movie take that will come out. But so when people look at, like, why does he have pointed ears? That's because we used to. The backstory on that one is that as it was a commission from the Upper Deck Trading Card Company to do packaging for their then Versus game, which was entering its, multiple years of usage as a game deck concept, and they would do it as a licensed thing with DC and Marvel characters, but of course they didn't mix the two. But that didn't stop me from being commissioned to do the art for both companies' stuff done for Upper Deck. That you've got a box of Marvel cards, you got a box of DC cards, and I can make the two paintings I did interlock in a way where one is bouncing off of the other. So basically I made it where the Marvel painting is below in all black with the background being dark and the colors being kind of greenish hue. So it's a very green looking Spider-Man in the painting I did. Where the DC piece is a white background with warm lighting, reddish, orangish lighting, and the figures are kind of reflecting the idea that the DC stuff is above, the Marvel stuff is below, and you can find some relationships between positions of figures, and particularly that the archers are both reacting to one another. So it's sort of a crossover between two companies that at this time, and most of the century now, they don't allow any licensors to play with putting the DC Marvel characters together in anything. That is part of my book that comes out this summer. That is the first thing that you will see of storytelling in my FF book, where we're also making a print of it. And it is my take on the Fantastic Four origin that I've written, and it matches the way that I did origins for all of the DC heroes I had previously done for a series of tabloid books from the early 2000s. So I'm inking instead of painting for the reasons of trying out something different. I've done inked projects a little bit before, and in this case I wanted to limit myself to the process of imitating this to do what is ultimately my tribute to the classic Fantastic Four comics that I've grown up with, and in particular the original run, 100-some issues by Jack Kirby. The nature of me trying to connect with Jack Kirby's work through my style is sort of like trying to find that middle ground between slavish realism, which would be me, and abstraction, which is Jack Kirby, and thinking that there's a middle ground that could be achieved, that like if you're going to adapt his works into any other media, particularly with live actors or animation, that there's a way to capture what it is Jack was doing without necessarily losing a lot of the contours and the overall physicality of it. And since I'm somewhat obsessed, more even as I've gotten older, as opposed to just connecting with a youthful kind of inspiration, I've become even more of a fan of Jack Kirby's work the longer the years carry on. Moon Knight has apparently taken some connection to a design I did once in the Universe X comic series from 20 years ago of a future version of Moon Knight, as if he has been slowly getting killed and reborn over and over again, protecting this this pyramid with the shrine to his moon god. So his whole look is the classic hood and cloak over bandages, And now the TV Moon Knight series is effectively that look. But what I remember reading when I was a kid, when I first encountered Moon Knight in the back pages of the Hulk magazine, was he was this slick-looking white and black costume character that just really stood out beautifully amongst all the sort of 70s era new characters for Marvel. And he was one of the most exciting new characters introduced. I want to do a piece of Thor that's going to kind of screw with the whole way that I could illustrate him, because I feel like the classic version of the character that Kirby designed, that has the red and blue costume and everything, which is very abstract superhero, people like me have always been trying to figure out how does it fit into our sense of a sort of realistic take on the character, and we overthink it to the point of ruining what was pretty primal superhero stuff. When, you know, like the fact that Thor as designed for the 1963 version is essentially a Viking long-haired superhero that looks really nothing like the legendary Thor, who has the beard and red hair and everything. He just looks like superhero Viking, and he's got bright Superman colors, and he's very pop art aesthetic in a way. I thought if you could almost embrace that in a way of making him seem all that much more abstract in his very being, I want to kind of communicate that in a painting where I could almost energize the color and life in him with an abstract to seem like the very sight of Thor is itself like you're looking at an unreal being, and not just a big strong guy who's taller than anybody else you've seen, who's 5 or 6'5", 6'6" is how tall he's supposed to be. That's big. That's scare your ass big when you see that in person. Then he's got the wings on top of that. I want to kind of adapt a version of him where he'd almost look like he's almost out of sync with our universe, like he's almost self-luminous. And since I do that a lot with people on fire and other glowing effects, I want to try that with a painting at least, that can at least put the idea out there into the universe. Because part of me feels like the ultimate version of Thor is one that's got just bright blue legs and red cape and vibrant, and he's got all these colors on him that you don't overthink the way that they come across when you're reading an old comic. It's just that people have to sort of reinterpret that stuff to make it seem more grounded and real. And I'm not sure that's the right way to go with this anymore. This Wonder Woman piece was deliberately done to match the sort of side profile painting I had done of Thor, giving it sort of a companion without the two pieces being directly related, because the licenses that we have are not themselves cooperative, but you're not prevented from doing compositions that might mirror one another, that there's almost a relationship. And the symbology of Wonder Woman being a composite or comparable to the character of Thor is perfectly sensible given her mythological history being similar to his. They're both kind of on a demigod status, or, well, actually he's a full god, and she was supposed to have been created from clay and imbued with life from the gods, so it's a whole thing. But yeah, I mean, her pose is a direct counterpart to the shot of Thor with his hammer out, and her instead holding her magic lasso. So